A 14-year-old black girl named Aaliyah Carter was publicly cut from the varsity track team by Coach Raymond Stokes in front of her entire team, and told that girls with her body type were not built for competitive athletics, that she was wasting everyone's time, and that she should find something more suitable for someone like her. What Coach Stokes did not know was that Aaliyah's mother, Dr. Serena Carter, had competed in the Olympic Games twice, had won gold in the 400 meters in Athens, and was at that exact moment driving to the school to pick up her daughter after practice. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, and the air at Riverside High School carried the particular sharpness of early autumn, cool enough to see your breath if you exhaled slowly, warm enough in the direct sunlight that the girls on the track still wore their practice shorts. The track itself was a deep red oval that had been resurfaced the previous summer, its lanes crisp and white, curving around a football field that was empty at this hour. 8 girls stood near the finish line of the straightaway, their spikes on, their hair pulled back, their bodies carrying the loose readiness of athletes who had been warming up for 30 minutes and were waiting to be told what came next. Aaliyah Carter stood at the far left of the group. She was 14 years old, with dark brown skin and the long, powerful legs of a girl whose body was still becoming what it was going to be. She had natural hair pulled into a puff at the back of her head, and small gold studs in her ears that caught the afternoon light when she turned her head. She had been running track since she was 9 years old, not because her mother pushed her. Because the first time she ran a race at her elementary school field day, she felt something happen inside her body that she had spent 5 years trying to recreate and understand. The feeling of pure forward motion, the feeling of the ground giving way beneath her feet. The feeling of being exactly what she was built to be. Her personal best in the 400 meters was 58.3 seconds. She had run it 3 weeks ago at a summer invitational. She had written the number on a piece of tape and stuck it to the inside of her locker door. Not to show anyone, to see it every morning when she opened the locker and remember what her body was capable of. Coach Raymond Stokes had been the head track and field coach at Riverside High for 9 years. He was a compact man in his late 40s with close-cropped gray hair and the permanently impatient expression of someone who believed his time was more valuable than the time of the people around him. He wore a whistle on a lanyard around his neck and carried a stopwatch in his right hand with the unconscious comfort of a man who had been carrying one for decades. He had built a competitive program at Riverside. His teams had won 3 district titles. He was proud of this. He spoke about it often. He also had a way of looking at his athletes that sorted them into categories before they had run a single step, a way of seeing that was shaped by something older and narrower than the data in his clipboard. He had looked at Aaliyah Carter on the first day of tryouts the previous Tuesday with that sorting gaze, and something in the way he looked had settled into something that had nothing to do with her times. The afternoon session had consisted of repeat 400s at race pace. 6 repetitions, 90 seconds rest between each. Aaliyah had run the first 5. Her splits were consistent. 61, 60, 59.8, 59.4, 59.1, each one faster than the last. The kind of progression that coaches write down and circle. The kind of numbers that describe an athlete who responds to fatigue by accelerating rather than retreating. Coach Stokes had written them down. He had not circled them. After the 5th repetition, while the girls recovered, he walked along the line with his clipboard. He paused at each girl. Brief words, adjustments, encouragement for some, corrections for others. When he reached Aaliyah, he stopped and looked at his clipboard and then looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man who has already made a decision and is deciding how to deliver it. He said, "Carter, I want to talk to you before the 6th rep." She said, "Yes, coach." He said, "Step over here." They moved 3 steps to the side of the group, not far enough that the other girls could not hear. Aaliyah noticed this. She would remember it later. He had not taken her far enough away for privacy. Either he did not care that the others heard or he wanted them to hear. She was not certain which was worse. He looked at his clipboard again. He said, "Your times are adequate." He used that word, adequate, in a tone that contained everything it was supposed to contain. Then he said, "But I want to be direct with you because I think directness is more respectful than letting something go on longer than it should." He paused. The other 7 girls had gone very still. The sound of distant traffic on the road behind the school was audible in the silence. He said, "Track at the varsity level is a specific kind of demanding. It requires a specific kind of athlete." He looked at her when he said what came next, and his voice did not change its tone, which made what he said feel more permanent than if he had said it with heat. He said, "Girls with your body type, Carter, tend not to hold up at this level." He said, "I have seen it before. The frame is not built for the distance." He said, "I am not saying you are not a hard worker. I am saying that hard work cannot change certain things." He said, "I think you would be better served finding an activity that suits your build more naturally." He said, "Suits your build the way someone says a thing they have been thinking for a long time." Then he said, "I am not going to be selecting you for the varsity roster." The 7 other girls were absolutely still. One of them, a girl named Priya who stood closest to Aaliyah, had her hands pressed flat against her thighs and her jaw set in the specific way of someone who is preventing themselves from speaking. Another girl, a sophomore named Destiny who wore blue laces in her spikes, was looking at the track surface and blinking rapidly. Nobody moved. The afternoon light fell across all of them equally, and the shadow of the goalpost at the far end of the football field stretched long and thin across the red track surface. Aaliyah looked at Coach Stokes for 3 seconds. She had her mother's eyes, dark and precise and capable of holding something completely still even when everything underneath was in motion. She said, "Yes, Coach." She said it the same way her mother had taught her to say things in moments that required more than words. Quietly. Completely. Without surrender. Then she reached down and picked up her gear bag from the track surface, and she walked to the bench near the bleachers, and she sat down and she began to unlace her spikes. Inside her chest, something was happening that she had no word for at 14. Not anger, not yet. Not sadness, not exactly. It was the specific sensation of being told that the thing you knew about yourself was wrong by someone who had spent 4 minutes watching you and had decided that 4 minutes was enough. It was the sensation of the number 58.3 on the tape inside her locker being told by someone who had never seen that tape that it did not mean what she knew it meant. She unlaced her spikes slowly. She breathed through her nose. She thought about her mother. She always thought about her mother in moments that required steadiness, the same way you think about a fixed point on the horizon when the ground beneath you is uncertain. She did not know that her mother was already in the parking lot. Dr. Serena Carter had arrived at Riverside High School at 4:47 in the afternoon. She had come directly from the university where she taught exercise science and sports physiology, still wearing her faculty lanyard over a light jacket, her natural hair out around her face, her posture carrying the particular uprightness of a woman who had spent 20 years being the most prepared person in every room she entered. She had parked near the fence that bordered the track and was walking toward the gate when she saw the line of girls standing very still near the finish line and her daughter sitting alone on the bench near the bleachers taking off her spikes. She stopped at the gate. She read the scene the way she had learned to read a race, the body language, the spacing, the tension in the group, the specific quality of stillness that means something has just happened and nobody has moved yet. She saw the coach standing with his clipboard. She saw the 7 girls frozen in place. She saw Aaliyah on the bench with her head down and her hands moving on her shoelaces. She had been a competitive athlete for 19 years. She had stood on the start line of 2 Olympic finals. She had learned to read the difference between the stillness before something begins and the stillness after something ends. This was the second kind. She pushed open the gate and walked onto the track. Her footsteps on the track's surface were quiet, but they carried. Priya saw her first, then Destiny, then the other girls. Their eyes moved to the woman walking across the infield with a lanyard around her neck and a specific quality of forward motion that the girls on that team had not seen before but recognized in some wordless way as something significant. Coach Stokes heard the footsteps and turned. She stopped 4 feet from him. She did not look at the clipboard. She looked at him. She said, "I am Serena Carter, Aaliyah's mother." He said, "Mrs. Carter, practice is not quite finished." She said, "I can see that." She said it without any particular expression. Then she said, "Can you tell me what just happened with my daughter?" He said, "I was explaining my roster decisions for this season." She said, "And what did you decide about Aaliyah?" He said, I have decided not to place her on the varsity roster at this time. My evaluation indicated that her build was not suited for competition at this level. She was quiet for a moment. The 7 girls on the track were watching. Aaliyah had stopped unlacing her spikes. She was watching from the bench with her spikes half off and her hands very still. Her mother stood on the track in the afternoon light with her faculty lanyard moving slightly in the breeze, and she looked at Coach Stokes with the dark, precise eyes that Aaliyah had inherited, and she said, You evaluated my daughter's build. He said, I evaluated her athletic profile, yes. She said, what were her splits today? He looked at his clipboard. He said her times. She listened to each one. Then she said, what was her progression across 5 repetitions? He read them again. 61, 60, 59.8, 59.4, 59.1. She nodded once. Then she said, Coach Stokes, I want to ask you something and I want you to think before you answer. She said, in your evaluation of my daughter's build, what specifically did you observe that indicated she was not suited for competition at this level? He opened his mouth. He said, the frame, the musculature, he stopped. He tried again. He said, in my experience, he stopped again. She let the silence sit for 4 full seconds. Then she said, my name is Dr. Serena Carter. I hold a doctorate in exercise science from the University of Michigan. I have been teaching sports physiology for 11 years. She paused. Then she said, I also competed in the Olympic Games twice, in 2004 in Athens and 2008 in Beijing. She said, in Athens I ran the 400 meters in 49.6 seconds and won the gold medal. She did not say it to impress him. She said it the way she wrote citations in her academic papers, as data that was relevant to the question being discussed. She said, I am telling you this not because of what I accomplished. I am telling you because I want you to understand that I know what a body built for the 400 meters looks like. She looked at him steadily. Then she said, I know because I have that body, and my daughter has it too. The track was completely silent. The 7 girls standing near the finish line were not moving. Priya had her hand over her mouth. Destiny had stopped blinking. Coach Stokes was holding his clipboard and looking at Serena Carter with the expression of a man who has said something in a room he believed was empty and has discovered it was not. His face moved through several things in the space of a few seconds. Recognition, something close to understanding. Something that was not quite shame but was in the same neighborhood. Aaliyah had put her spike back on. She had laced it. She stood up from the bench. She walked across the track to where her mother was standing. She stopped beside her. She did not say anything. She did not need to say anything. She stood beside her mother on the same track where 12 minutes ago she had been told that her body was not built for this, and she looked at Coach Stokes and she waited. Coach Stokes said, Dr. Carter. I may have made an assessment that was. He stopped. He said, I would like to reconsider the roster decision regarding Aaliyah. Serena said, I think that would be appropriate. She said it without triumph. She said it the way you confirm something that was already true. Destiny started clapping first. 1 pair of hands on a Thursday afternoon at Riverside High School, blue laces in her spikes, clapping on the red track surface. Then Priya. Then 3 more. Then all 7 girls were clapping, and someone let out a sound that was half laugh and half something else entirely. The sound of a group of young women who had stood frozen for 12 minutes watching something wrong happen, and were now watching it be corrected in front of their eyes. The clapping lasted for 9 seconds, and it was the most significant 9 seconds of sound Aaliyah Carter had heard in her 14 years. Her mother put her hand on the back of her neck briefly, the way she had done since Aaliyah was small, a specific gesture that meant I am here, I see you, nothing about this changes who you are. Then she said quietly so that only Aaliyah could hear, go get your bag. Aaliyah said, yes, ma'am. She walked to the bench. She picked up her gear bag. She came back and stood beside her mother. Serena looked at Coach Stokes and said, Aaliyah will be at practice tomorrow morning. He said, yes, she will be on the roster. Serena said, thank you. Then she and Aaliyah walked off the track together through the gate and across the parking lot to the car. In the car, Serena did not start the engine immediately. She sat for a moment. Aaliyah sat beside her with her gear bag on her lap and her spikes still on and her hands folded. Then Serena said, how do you feel? Aaliyah said, I do not know yet. Her mother nodded. She said, that is an honest answer. She said, Aaliyah, I want you to hear something. She said, what that man said about your body today was not an assessment. It was an assumption. She said, there is a difference. An assessment requires information. An assumption requires only a decision that has already been made. She said, he looked at you and made a decision, and then he looked for reasons to support it. That is not coaching. She said, I need you to know that difference because you are going to encounter it again. Not always on a track, but in rooms and in offices and in spaces where someone is going to look at you and decide before you open your mouth. She paused. Then she said, your 58.3 is real. The number on your locker is real. What you felt when you ran it is real. None of that changed in the last 12 minutes. Do you understand? Aaliyah said, yes, ma'am. Her mother said, good. She started the engine. Then Aaliyah said, Mom, how did you know to come? Serena said, I always know. She said it simply and without explanation, and Aaliyah understood that some things between a mother and a daughter do not require explaining. Aaliyah Carter ran the 400 meters at the district championships that spring in 57.8 seconds. A personal best by half a second. Coach Stokes was at the finish line when she crossed it. He said, Carter, good race. She said, thank you, Coach. She said it without irony and without coldness. She said it because she had decided in September that what he had said on the track was his limitation and not hers, and she had been running away from his limitation and toward her own best time ever since. 57.8. She wrote the number on a new piece of tape and put it next to the old one inside her locker door. 2 numbers, both real, both hers. My name is Silent Truth. Every voice that was silenced deserves to be heard. And every girl who has ever been told her body is not built for the thing she loves deserves to know that someone who looks exactly like her has already proved that wrong.